found some old pieces of cardboard, maybe some boxes. I found this box for lights. I found this piece of cardboard that was in a pack of paper, and I also have some old cereal boxes that I can cut up. Use your flip chart markers to draw your design on the back of the piece of cardboard so that when you flip it over, you will have that nice, shiny, smooth, waxy texture of your cardboard. Once you get your design all cut out with the scissors that you've been provided, you will have to flip it over and place it onto your other piece of cardboard in order to start the process of turning it into a printmaking plate. While holding my cardboard in place with the tip of my scissors, I rubbed some glue onto the back, and I'm just going to place my cardboard on top. The glue stick will not glue completely, so if things get pushed off course, I can always rearrange it. It is not the nature of the glue stick to be exceptionally strong. If you do have liquid glue, I would definitely suggest using that instead. But if you do have to use the glue stick, just make sure that the pieces are securely glued down. If not, just lift up the piece, rub some glue underneath of it, and make sure you hold it down until it's completely stuck. You don't want these pieces coming up once you go to print. This is now our printing plate, and it's starting to look fantastic. I think I'm going to add some extra details. Because a print is printed in inverse, or backwards like in a mirror, making letters in your printmaking plate can be a little bit tricky. However, here is a trick that you can use. Write it on the back of the piece of cardboard and then rub the glue onto the letter itself after you've cut it out. Stick it down, it will automatically be inverse. So here I have N-O-J-U, and I'm just about to put on my S. So that is how you can determine how to do the mirror image of a letter. When you're spelling in reverse like this, it's kind of hard to remember the letters, so you might want to write it out before you start cutting it and pasting it on in inverse. But once you're done, you just want to make sure everything is stuck down really well before you start the next step. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry for a bit, but if you're having trouble with this concept of an inverse image, if you've ever used Snapchat, you know that any letters on your shirt seem backwards, like you're looking in the mirror. That is an inverse image. It's just like looking in the mirror. And so if we could see the other side of this, which we can't right now because it's wet, when we press this down in a print, the letters will go back to being in the correct orientation. Pretty cool, huh? On a piece of paper a little bit bigger than my printmaking plate, I'm going to do some coloring so that when I do go to print it, it will have some color to it. When you go to make your coloring, it doesn't have to be exactly the precise image of what is on your printmaking plate. The idea is just to get this general idea, general location, looking back and forth and comparing the proportions or how big the different parts are. One of the considerations that you have to make when you're coloring is color theory. And color theory is pretty tricky. You've probably heard of the three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, which when combined create any other colors of the rainbow. You've probably also heard of adding black to make a shade, or adding white to make a tint, which creates the different values of color. You've probably already heard about adding brown or a neutral color in order to make different intensities of colors. You may have even heard about the different color families in which you create some designs. Like for example, I'm leaning more toward the warm color family in my coloring so far. I've got the reds, the oranges, and the yellows. I do recognize that you don't have any yellow markers in your pack. However, you can use a highlighter if you have one, you can use your own markers, or you can even use color pencils, although I would not suggest using the pastels, as that will actively resist any liquid ink that you use for your print. And so As I am focused on the warm colors, I might add a little bit of one of the cool colors. So you can see the division here. We've got the warm colors and we've got the cool colors of the color wheel. And I might add a cool color for emphasis and draw the eye to one location, but I want to make sure not to add any black to my coloring because we are going to be printing with black, so I want to leave that off. But I actually put the thumb on the same side as the printmaking plate, but I just got done telling you that everything's in inverse, so I actually had to redo it. Whew. I think that what I really needed to do was to compare and contrast and be like, okay, if the mirror image is going to be the coloring, then where do I need to draw things? And that was how I determined that I had done it wrong. But now I have it fixed. Alas, we were not given ink. And so what I have done is I've put a little bit of water into this part of the container here of my watercolor paints. And I'm filling it with some dark values. I can use a little bit of purple and brown if I want to make it have a deeper tone. But the idea is that while we're waiting for our printing plate to dry, we're creating the ink that we're going to use in order to print it. I definitely put a little bit too much water in there, and so I'm going to let it sit and let the water evaporate, leaving the color behind. I'm actually going to use this piece of paper where I messed up as my registration device, and registration just means printing in the right spot. So what I will do is I will place my printmaking plate on top of the rectangle that I've made. If you did not make a mistake, you can trace out a rectangle onto another piece of white paper the same size as the one we're going to print on. And after you have inked this up, then you can just place this piece of paper directly on top and it will be in the exact right location. Then you just paint the slick cardboard with this watercolor goo that we've created. You really want to get it in there and try to avoid the other cardboard. If it slips a little bit, it's not going to really ruin things. You want to make sure that there's enough water to spread it out, but not so much water that it drips. And the idea is to really get it on there on all of those little pieces of cardboard. Those are going to create the black lines on your project. It starts to bead up almost immediately. And this is why printmaking uses ink and not paint. But once you lay your paper on top of your inked printmaking plate, then you need to burnish the back really well. Burnishing means to rub it until all of the ink has transferred. After I pull my print, I see that I did not do a good job of registering it. It is way off, but the great thing about printmaking is I can try again. This time when I painted it, I didn't use as much water so that it didn't bead up as much. You can see where I have used some water, a little too much water, and it is beading up and kind of falling off the slick cardboard. Also, some of my slick cardboard actually peeled off when I pulled my print last. So I'm just doing my best, not being too careful, just slapping it on there and we'll see what it does. This time I'm registering my print by sticking it onto the paper, and then I'm going to very carefully flip it over so that I can burnish, and just rubbing until you can see the ink coming through. Burnishing is a process of rubbing and smoothing the paper. It's not smashing it or banging it or pressing it. And if this is hard for you because you have sensory input issues, you can always use the back of something that's very smooth, like a bottle of glue. Not wanting to burnish too long, I do want to pull my print before it gets stuck. And so let's see what we come up with. This one looks a lot nicer. Did not maybe use enough ink, but it still looks pretty cool. You can also use a marker in order to get the ink onto the project. Printmaking is about repeatability, and I would love to have a whole edition of this print. An edition is just a set of prints that are all the same. Now, these are more like artist prints than editions because they are going to be slightly different, but I'd like to give it a shot. Well then, I actually do like the effect of using the marker, but there's a lot of different ways that we can play with it. And once you've printed, that doesn't mean you have to stop there. You can actually color this with colored pencils and make it look more interesting. Another color scheme you might want to consider are opposite colors or complementary colors. I think that yellow and purple are a couple of the most beautiful complementary colors. I certainly kept up with my theme of using warm colors because I believe that the nature of my design calls for warm colors, fiery colors, but I also wanted to add that opposite color of the purple. And so you probably know that the opposite colors are red and green, orange and blue, and of course yellow and purple. I balanced my work of art by making the yellow in the center and the purple on the outside. It has a nice radially symmetric sort of design to it, and I can't wait to see how it turns out. I really do like the watercolor altogether. I think it's really beautiful. I could definitely reprint it with a little bit more ink, or even just wait till it dries and color it in with colored pencils. But I believe that this is my crowning achievement with this project, so I am going to stop here. Even though we have not followed the exact strategy for making a print, I still want to show you how to label it. And so if you have made a print like this with an edge around it, that border is very important. It actually draws the eye to the artwork itself. And so you would write how many you made out of how many. So this is just 1 out of 3. I made 3 that I'd like to keep. And then the title goes in the center. Notice that I'm using a pencil. That's just what you would do. I'm going to title this Civil Unrest. And then on this side, on the right side, that is where you would sign your work. I have a little symbol that I use in order to sign my work. So I put that, and I'm also going to put the date. I'm just going to write 20 is the year. So that's how you would label a print. Remember, art is many things. Art is a revelation of your own thoughts and feelings, your own personal voice. Art is also a reflection of what's happening around you. As I reflect upon this project and all the hard work that led to this finished piece, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I'm a little bit overwhelmed by how much work we have to do in order to make beauty. I am amazed at how the techniques matter, how attention to detail matters. So as you do your project, I just want you to be encouraged. The first time you try something, it might not be perfect, but that's not a reason to stop. Bye!